We're ready.
All right, welcome to the October 2nd, 2023 regularly scheduled work session. Tonight, there are 4 items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you're required to fill out a public comment card, and if you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority of said organization. Please remember, this is not a time to engage the mayor and members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone, stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per, do we have public comment allowed? I guess. Okay. Didn't know that. Yeah. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Once the item is called, no other public cards will be accepted. Will the city clerk please sound agenda item A?
Mayor, that first item is updated on underway public works projects. Our Public Works Director, Ms. Sarah Leaders.
Have a full agenda item of Public Works items tonight. And the order we're going to go in, we're going to start with just a brief update of kind of some of the projects that are underway, what stages those are in, which will set the stage for the next item, which is the update on the transportation plan that will look at proposed future projects for the next several years. And then following that, we'll touch on the green print and end with the strategic plan that actually ties to all 3 of these items. So lots of connectivity between the items tonight, and I will start with the project update.
I had to call, have them send me all the roundabouts. I couldn't figure out all the roundabouts.
The first slide I wanted to begin with is a look at the past 16 years, what all the Public Works Department has done in partnership with other agencies related to transportation projects, and just really the quantity of projects we have done, the number of roundabouts, the number of signals, bridges, that sort of project, and then to show those geographically in the city, as well as show the funding sources. So this really shows what the impact of T-SPLOST has been on our capital program. I'd be glad to talk about any of these specifically, but most of these have either been completed or most of the ones underway are the federal and state projects, which I will highlight in a minute. And then I'll talk about any of the outstanding T-SPLOST 1 projects that haven't been constructed yet. So related to the DOT projects, have those broken kind of into 3 categories. First is the major improvement projects. That's the McGinnis Ferry Interchange, the Highway 9 widening in Milton, as well as the segment that's in Alpharetta that's under construction right now. I did pull from GDOT's tracking website on those 2 projects, the percent complete, and sometimes that has to do with the amount of billing or how they're tracking the percent complete, but they have the McGinnis Ferry Interchange marked at 40% complete and the Alpharetta widening marked at about 50% complete. Again, that's from their tracking tool, and I'm not sure the metrics that they follow to assigning those percentages, but just wanted to give an update on those. Local bridge program, these are the 3 that are in design currently, where DOT is providing all the engineering and they will do the right-of-way and construction for these 3 projects that, again, these are already in design. Hopewell in Birmingham will be our program for construction in 2026 and Freemanville in 2025. Then, yes.
Quick question on some of these where we're widening the bridges or fixing the bridges, that's not going to change the truck traffic that we disallow within the city, because that's the concern that a lot of residents are voicing.
Right, the truck routes would remain the same. It would just allow, we have some bridges that school buses can't go across actually because of the weight restriction. So these aren't to that point yet, but it's to just reset the structural life on the bridge.
But as we talk to GDOT, we're not going to change any of our roadways where we've got the heavy trucks should not be going on. Because I know we see them. I see them. They come through. We don't have people monitoring everything all the time, but I know this will make it a little bit easier for those. So we may talk to public safety about that once we get those underway.
Okay.
Well, I think as traffic patterns change too, Sarah, when McGinnis is done, for example, we know that some of the traffic that has historically gone south may stay further north. And these bridges in particular are north. So I'm just want to make sure I hear you say it one more time. We have not sacrificed any commitment to any change in our trucking patterns to the state or anybody else for that matter with the construction of these bridges under the current conditions that we're cooperating with.
That's right. Our truck routes are in our ordinance established as the roads that trucks can legally,
Right.
unless they have a delivery
Mhm.
at an exact location along that route.
Great, thank you.
The last GDOT update is the Birmingham Crossroads mini roundabout. If you've been through that, it is functioning as a roundabout. They don't have the center island poured yet or the splitter islands. They did reach out to us about the concrete color. So we are matching what we did at Hopewell Bethany with kind of a darker brown and a cobble pattern. So it'll look very consistent with the other roundabouts in the city. So that is an update on that one. And
And
they
there's
had,
no center feature in that one, correct, Sarah?
correct, it's all just
None at all.
concrete.
Okay.
But I think it's beautiful the way it is. Just leave it.
All right.
And Sarah, are you going to talk more about roundabouts, or is this the opportunity to sort of bring up some concerns I've got about some of our roundabouts?
I'm going to talk about the ones that are underway, but any that are currently operational.
Okay, I'll wait then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next I'm going to highlight what city projects are underway. So I'm going to go to our ClearGov site to just run through a couple quick updates here. So we've started using this site to track projects by type. So there's a link on our website that gets to this location, and then the projects tab is where all the project sheets live. I'm going to start with, our involvement in the Milton City Park and Preserve Passive Park Phase 2. That one's funded with the GOSP funding, Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program. So this is where we'll track that project. It's the Phase 2 trail on the east side of the property. We're tracking the Dinsmore connection separately, which I'll show you under T-Splosh 2, but this is where the details on that project live and the updates on that. You may remember we're in preliminary plans right now. We've just gotten survey, and we're going to be holding a public meeting probably at the Milton Community Center next month, hopefully, to share the plans and get impact from the adjoining neighbors and anyone else that wants to attend and review the proposals.
So Sarah, is that where the additional conversation is going to take place about concrete versus asphalt and which sides of the road and that kind of stuff?
Right.
So we're not any further along with that. That's still coming, that input?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
that's what that meeting will be. Okay. And just to highlight, this is where the Fire Station 45, all the documents related to that will live on this page. And Rob Del Ross is going to be our project manager on that one. So they're working on the consultant selection right now and hope to have that fairly soon before you for consideration. In Public Works in general, this is where we're going to track all the local road safety plan initiatives. I'll show you the details of that page in a minute. We have the City Hall parking lot. That project, you may have noticed, we have a bit of new asphalt out there. We're going to do the striping later this week, and then we're going to have to wait till the spring to come back and kind of recoat the parking lot and remark all the spaces.
How many additional spaces, Sarah? are gonna
We
come through?
have 20. So this is the layout. We have 6 that were cut into the island here. By removing this island, we're able to get 10 more, or 5 on each side. And then by changing out what was going to be the dumpster space, we're able to get some there and then 1 here.
Great.
So the final product will not be ready till spring when we can that material we put down has to have warm weather to make it cure. and this cold front that's come in, as well as the timing of having everything open for the early voting. We just are going to go ahead with some marking to get it tidied up until we can get it completed in the spring. T-Splost 1. Zoom out. Start with Freemanville, Birmingham. There may be some questions what's going on with that one. We have had some complex utility relocations with that project. The final utility conflict is getting ready to set their new pole this week. They'll have to do a little bit of underground and some overhead connections. Once they're out of the way, we can continue with the stormwater installation. It may not look like it, but we do have a bit of infrastructure already underground out there. They've done the storm pipes that were not in conflict with utilities. So once utilities are completely out of the way, they'll finish the storm pipe, start putting in curb, and we'll get an updated schedule from the contractor. The utility conflicts are really out of their control, we have very limited control over them. It's just getting those scheduled, and they have to follow a certain order. So that's what's going on with Freemanville, Birmingham.
Sir, a quick question about that one. Right now, the lighting that is there is probably, the additional lighting that we put up, I'm sure is appropriate for construction phase. I don't know that I know what the lighting plan is for the completed project. I'm assuming the really bright lights that are there now will be extracted at the end of the project?
So usually once it's completed, we'll go out and look at where the power poles got set, the new ones. Sometimes we've had to set one additional wooden post just to eliminate all the approaches. That's really the goal, is just to get some minimal lighting that will right size at the end of the project. So the ones that are there could be removed, could be replaced, just to get the best lighting of just the approaches to the roundabout.
And when we're looking at that, what I'm hearing you say, though, with the kind of lighting you just, I think, are suggesting is that it's going to be single or maybe two pretty bright lights that light that up.
Yes.
Can we go back and revisit the more decorative lighting that's probably more rural friendly and more in keeping with some of the original vision that we had for roundabouts? We seem to have gotten away from the ability to revisit that project by project. Is that something we can go back and still do?
We could bring the landscaping and the lighting back before you for another. I know at this one too, we talked about the center feature of it, and originally we had a pretty prominent tree plan for the center, but we in the feedback session, I believe we switched that to some sort of art feature instead. And so getting some more feedback on what that looks like, as well as any lighting recommendations too. We can plan to do that for this location.
And some of this will come after my role is complete. So I won't have a chance to voice, except maybe from the podium where you're standing in the future. But I just think that we've kind of lost our way a little bit. It's one thing for construction lighting. I get that. It needs to be bright. It's different. There's danger that's involved with during the construction phases. But I'd like to go back and revisit our commitment to being more rural, and in doing so, getting rid of some of the bright lights that are kind of becoming our pattern, and get back to something that's a little bit more in keeping with the initial vision we had when we were introducing roundabouts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next update, another project under construction is the Mayfield Road sidewalks. So that is connecting the Lakeside Park to Freemanville. That one, the multi-use paths are mostly completed. We have the fencing still to go in, and then the repaving of Mayfield Road. We're going to do some bicycle markings on Mayfield, and we're going to do a pedestrian crossing with a median refuge island. The paving is actually scheduled for this Friday and Saturday, weather permitting. And then the median work and the crosswalk will be the next things to go in. We're hoping to have that one completed in about a month.
Where's the crossing on Mayfield?
It is right across from the Alpharetta neighborhood. Well, actually, sorry, it It's at the highest point in the road, so it's got the best visibility. It also aligns with where the path goes behind the tree. So kind of that off-road path is on the north side and the accessible route is on the south side, and having that crossing is the ideal location. So it is, yep, kind of right where that large tree is.
Great, thank you.
So will that be a whole new crosswalk, some new, and you've heard me say before, if we can look at trying to get if we can get visually handicapped crosswalks where it's not just the sign, but it's the sound also. I just would like to see us, if council is in support of that, we could lead the way. Nobody else up here is doing that, but I know people in our city that can't cross the road because they can't see the numbers. But if they had the sound like in Tallahassee and other places, as we're putting in new wire and putting new things, I just ask that we actually be intentional about that, because this is our one time to do it without having to rewire.
Okay. Next up, Bethany at Providence. That one is in right-of-way acquisition phase. That is going to be a roundabout at that location, and we will be bringing forward discussion about landscaping and lighting on that one. We've not done that for that particular project yet. Big Creek Greenway connection, that is the project with federal funds as well as T-SPLOST dollars for the local match, connecting Cambridge High School all the way over to ultimately to the Big Creek Greenway. That one we are in right-of-way acquisition on. Birmingham Middle Bridge, another one in right-of-way acquisition up here on Birmingham Road. Freemanville at Red, we're in preliminary plans there. We're also looking at a modification to the project to incorporate some improvements at more for drainage and pedestrians at Summit and Freemanville as well. So we'll be bringing that before you when we have a preliminary plan for those two intersections.
Sarah, is that still turn lanes?
It is.
Solution there?
Right.
And did we resolve the issue that was brought before us by the resident there, where our extended concrete was going to be
Right, we were going to adjust
restricting
that.
access to his driveway? That's
Yes.
all been resolved?
Yes,
Great.
definitely.
Sarah, how about at the other end where we run Red into Hopewell? That left-hand turn,
It's
you know,
tough.
pulling out of Red to make a left onto Hopewell is,
Impossible.
yeah, it's nasty. Is there anything we've thought of or can come up with?
There is, when we did a batch of design projects all together to look at some concepts, we grouped Bethany Providence, Freemanville at Red, and Hopewell at Red all together, and had kind of looked at the traffic because they're somewhat connected with where they exist geographically. And we believe our recommended alternative that came out of that study was for a traffic signal. And we got a lot of negative feedback in our public input that didn't feel like that was the best fit for that location. The roundabout was very, I guess it took up a very large footprint there. And with there's a lake or a small pond on one of the corners. There's a utility. It was a difficult fit. And when the signal provided the same benefit, it was tough to weigh that as a preferred option. So we tabled it at that time. That was back in 2021, maybe. Yeah. We still have it as a project with all the documents that we put together on it, but we somewhat tabled it till we could see how Hopewell Bethany impacted traffic too, because at the time it was just starting construction. So we've not looked at it again since Hopewell Bethany's been completed to see if traffic patterns have changed. It still is on our radar, and we just haven't found, I think, the most accepted solution for that location yet.
How do we move that forward? Because I know people are getting really frustrated with that intersection. Is there anything we can do to move that along or to bring it back up? Or
so one of our CTP projects we'll talk about has to do with Red Road, and that may be the opportunity to look at something different there. So we'll talk about that one
Okay.
I think
later.
the last time we were talking about that was right when the redistricting was going on with the schools, and we really hadn't fully experienced what the traffic pattern changes were going to be. And I think it's proven out that red Hopewell has become worse rather than, I mean, certainly Bethany Hopewell has made an improvement. However, maybe this is an opportunity to talk about this as well. I don't know what the conclusion is at the moment about the speed bump that's there. I know that it probably has resolved the situation for the homeowner with their driveway, but oh my goodness, the backup that now exists there because people have to slow to the point of 0 to get over the speed bump, we've now created a new problem there
What time of day is that usually?
at rush hour.
Okay.
So morning or evening. And it's just, you've got people lining up going north on Hopewell. You got people lining up going south on Hope because nobody can get through the roundabout because the roundabout is full. There's no gap. So we've got to look at that further. And it has solved the immediate problem that was the safety of the homeowner that was right there, but it has compounded our traffic problem.
Yep, that's when we're going to do some analysis of, we have some before counts. We're going to look at some traffic counts after it's been in place for a while. We're also looking, we have the grant application that we'll hear back on hopefully this month for some other innovative things to look at on some of these roundabout entries and exits. So if we've received that funding, we could utilize that to see where the balance is between operations and speeds.
I would just put back on the table one of the things that has not been on the table, and that is to revisit the slope that's there where the wall was built. We've created our own visual obstruction there. And if we go back and look at revisiting that, taking the slope down, making the wall go away, your visual line of sight improves significantly. And as such, that may resolve the speed problem too. Just food for thought.
I'm not sure you'll ever resolve the speed problem. People they're driving faster everywhere.
Well, I was
But-
impressed that Milton Police have been more present at some of our roundabouts more recently, which I
Yeah.
think is a great first step to begin to monitor some of the issues that we now are seeing with speeding in the roundabouts. But
Do you do any visual monitoring? I mean, I know you do the traffic count in a circle, but to me, it would seem that doing some sort of visual monitoring to see how cars react, because when I've been through the speed bump, there hasn't been a problem, but I haven't been there when the traffic's been real heavy. So is there a way to set up some sort of visual monitoring to see what vehicles do so we get a better feel for not just the number of cars, but how they're operating or getting
I know
stuck?
at the roundabout by Crabapple, I've seen Rob out there with like a clipboard at school traffic. So I know he's been out there looking at the way the traffic flow is at the school here in the morning.
We also have done some drone footage. We did it of the Crabapple school traffic to see kind of where the backups are going to.
It's
And
been a lot
you
better.
can really get a in motion picture too. So we have started using drone footage for some of those peak times to get a
Just better
picture.
feel for it, yeah.
Mhm, yes.
Mhm.
All right. Okay, that was Freemanville Red. Okay, last two, T-Splost 1, Morris Road widening. That one is nearing completion of the right-of-way acquisition. We actually hope to put this out for construction bids later this year. 140 at Green, that is a traffic signal. We've submitted the traffic signal permit to DOT. We have our nearly completed preliminary plans. We're getting ready to finalize those and start acquiring the right-of-way needed. So we're not only doing the signal, but we're also extending the sidewalk down to the Kroger Shopping Center. So bringing some pedestrian elements in with that project as well. All right, last up, T-Splost 2. So while we didn't have a defined T-Splost 2 list, we had some buckets of categories. We have run across quite a few projects now that felt like were a good fit to start advancing under that program. So I'm going to highlight the ones we have already in the works. And part of the next presentation will actually lay out, it'll show the ones that we've talked about just now, but we're going to focus the next presentation on the new T-Splost 2 proposed projects. All right, first project is there we go. It is a pedestrian crossing on Bethany Bend. So this is at where the Avonsong neighborhood hits Bethany Bend. There's continuous sidewalk on the north side of Bethany, so this gets that. It's a rectangular rapid flashing beacon pedestrian crossing with a little median island as a refuge to get that connection. That was the Tier 1 State Route 9 Deerfield area project from the trail prioritization plan. So that one, we have one small easement to get, and then we're ready to put that out for construction.
Good.
I asked, look in the other direction. I know we've got some properties for sale where the sidewalk goes in front of a couple of townhome subdivisions after Avonsong. I've had a mother reach out to me saying that, when are we going to complete that sidewalk? I said, we're doing the Morris Road widening. There's all the other things. Do we have a plan on allocating funds or doing something so that if you're heading towards Morris Road and McGinnis Ferry, from where that sidewalk ends by this is a single family home, the Brown home?
That one you'll hear about in the next presentation. We do have a project identified to, I believe it's a continuation on the north side to connect from that crossing all the way down to the McGinnis Morris
Yeah, 'cause
area.
that would be on the south side. That would go by Milton Montessori, because I know on the north side we've got, I think that's Forsyth on the north side.
That would be great feedback if the south makes more sense for that project and the number of residents it would connect. And because we already have the crossing at Avonsong, that connects most of the subdivisions to the north. So that's something definitely we can look at in the project description. But yeah, the gap was identified from where we're doing the crossing down to McGinnis. So how we get there is
It's just a little side
Still.
path today, and it's not a safe side path to walk
Right.
on. Okay, thank you.
all right. Next up is 372 rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So these are at the two roundabouts where Heritage Walk meets Birmingham Highway and Crabapple Road. We're still working that through with DOT for the final approval on which legs of those roundabouts get the flashing crossing signals. But that is, once we get the okay from DOT, it's just a matter, they're actually going to pay for the equipment. So all we have to do is put out a bid to have them installed. Next up, Cox Road. So we talked about the two intersections at Etris and King that are a shared funding with the city of Roswell. And we just got through concepts on those for some of those little bit smaller roundabouts at those two locations. We'll talk a little more about the Cox at 140. We're looking at trying to get a partnership project with the state on that one. So we're not moving ahead with design yet until we get some direction from Georgia DOT. Webb Cogburn. That is going to be some turn lanes at that traffic signal. It currently has no separate left or through lanes. So that's going to add some turn lanes at Webb and Cogburn. Bethany at Bethany Creek. So that was proposed as our first mini roundabout that the city's looking to do. Over the summer, we did some public outreach with the Bethany Creek neighborhood, as well as invited anyone that had interest in the project to come out and hear about the proposals. We had overwhelmingly support for the Bethany Creek mini roundabout. So we are nearly completed with construction drawings, and that will be out to bid for construction by the end of the year. We're gonna have a lot under construction next year. Lots going on. Okay. Next up, this one is under construction right now. We identified a couple small sidewalk gaps that were really a quick win for some connectivity in the Deerfield area, especially ahead of the Highway 9 widening coming. So we have a section on Deerfield near Highway 9. It's a gap that's getting filled in. Webb Road from Target over to Deerfield, that was another gap that's filling in. We have some drainage improvements on Bethany Bend, just past Bellaterra, I believe, is where there's been some ponding issues with that section of roadway. So we lumped that drainage improvement in with our project. And lastly, we have a little section on Hopewell Road too that we're filling in. Those are, again, under construction right now. We're nearly completed with Webb and Deerfield, have some sod and just a little bit of cleanup there. The others should be completed next couple months. Crabapple pedestrian streetscape. This component is for the pedestrian signal across Crabapple Road, right here connecting Crabapple Market to Crabapple Station. That one we are getting the final easements we need just for the signal component and hope to move forward with that in the next couple months for construction bid. Dinsmore multi-use path, that is related to the Phase 2 passive park improvements. So this is the section of trail that will run alongside the road. Like I said, we're tracking it a little differently because it can serve a roadway purpose, whereas interior to the park is simply recreational. This we can use T-SPLOST money for because it serves a transportation purpose. 372 multi-use paths. These were both from the trail prioritization plan. This is for connecting Arbor North into Crabapple. The multi-use path ends right here at Parkview, I believe. So it's extending that down to get Arbor North connected, as well as with the redevelopment of one of the properties on Crabapple Road. They're extending the multi-use path, so we're looking to extend that down Green Road to get connectivity again in the multi-use path to get down to Crabapple. That one we just have kicked off design, so it'll be several more months before we get to construction on that one. And last, I think we'll talk about Crabapple at Green next in our next presentation. I know that was a lot. Thank you for the good feedback on what we have underway. And I've not done one of these in a while, so it was good to just let you all know what all we have going on. So next, we're going to move to the CTP
Do we have
presentation.
any public comment on this?
Yes, we do, Mayor. I'd like to
Okay.
invite Ms. Julie Zahner Bailey to the podium.
All right, thank you.
The glasses are helpful. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City staff. My name is Julie Zahner Bailey, and I reside at 255 Hickory Flat Road, Milton, Georgia. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and tonight is no exception. As a longtime involved resident, citizen, community advocate, and public servant, I'm very interested in a number of the topics on tonight's work session agenda, and I do have some comments to share at the appropriate time, some of which I think would be now. Looking at tonight's agenda before coming this evening, it was a bit unclear as to the specifics of each agenda item, as there were no specifics listed on the website. So just one suggestion generally would be, and a request, would be for the details of the various agenda items for each meeting, including work sessions, to be posted in advance of a meeting. I think that would be certainly helpful for citizens so that we know what it is that we would be addressing and when. So I would just ask for a general request that be something. I think historically that was provided, and that seems to kind of gone away for some reason. But separately, as it relates to the presentation just now on Public Works, I'm not sure how many of these will be appropriate now versus later when Sarah Leaders comes back up. I would like to talk about speed reductions, roundabouts, bridges, and signage, in addition to green space. Sarah, are you going to be talking about speed reductions later?
On what we've
So I'll just ask for guidance from Mayor and Council as to whether or not you'd want me to speak about speed reductions and the importance of that now, or specifically just talk about roundabouts and bridges currently.
What we'll probably do, Ms. Sonner Bailey, is give me a list of your stuff, and we have a full docket tonight. If we don't get to it, we'll just ask for questions towards the end of the meeting, if that's okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I guess I was thinking that after each of the presentations, if whatever has come up, if I could then address it at that time. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I mean, you can do public comment before every agenda item tonight.
Yeah, and I'm just
So, yeah.
suggesting that after, because I have no idea what staff's report is. Until they've reported, it's hard to know what the appropriate response would be.
It's fair enough.
So for the moment, I'll just speak about roundabouts because Mrs. Leaders did speak about that. I'd like to talk about the roundabout at Hickory Flat Road and Birmingham Highway, since that is still underway. I will say, and I've communicated this to Ms. Leaders, that it's unfortunate there's no landscaping plan for the interior of that roundabout. I do understand that that was a GDOT call, not our own city staff, but I certainly wish that we could influence that desire to have an appearance of rural and somewhat natural in design. By having no landscaping in the center of those, it certainly becomes more commercial in nature. I realize we may or may not be able to do that at the moment, but it is a desire of the community that we have some natural components at the center of those roundabouts, so certainly including the Birmingham Highway, Hickory Flat roundabout that's under construction now. If there's a chance to add landscaping, that would be certainly up for consideration. It is my understanding from Ms. Leaders that staff is anticipating a streetscape plan for the Hickory Flat Road. I certainly support those improvements, as I know many citizens do, to provide a natural look and feel of this rural area, including the roadways. I'll certainly look forward to being part of that process when that comes to fruition. In the immediate, I would ask that no additional lighting or signage be added to the roundabout approach to this roundabout. Too often, what is supposed to be a rural roundabout with the intent of slowing traffic becomes overbuilt, overlit, and oversigned. Please proactively work to keep this intersection rural by design and help to avoid unnecessary lighting and signage. Our roadways either help to contribute to our rural by design, or they contribute to the demise of the rural look and feel that so many of us have worked on for so many years in the city of Milton. Along this same vein is a request to dismantle the concrete wall on the south side of Hickory Flat Road in front of the previous Wells Fargo building and across from 7 Acres. This wall is unnecessary, it's unsightly, and certainly not in keeping with the Birmingham Master Plan nor the Milton Rule Overlay. I would suggest that it also perhaps represents a real risk to drivers, as it is a concrete wall that if someone ran into it would perhaps cause personal injury. And I think we've seen enough of that and certainly don't need something constructed for more personal injury within our city.
I'm sorry. Before
Shoot.
we continue on, I believe that the time has passed on this particular public comment. I believe the council can waive the.
Sure,
time
yeah,
on
we
it.
can waive it. I mean, I'm just curious, so what items do you have specific to the agenda item that she just
But I
presented?
thought roundabouts was one.
Yeah,
Because that
absolutely.
was specifically addressed. Bridges would be the second.
Mhm.
And also signage as it relates to some of the area signage perhaps is going to be later. Again, it would have been very helpful to know under each agenda item what specifically was going to be addressed.
I understand. Yep.
So I can sit
Keep
down
on-
and
yeah,
come
no, you
back
keep
up,
on-
or I
keep
can
on
go
going.
on to bridges.
No, keep on going, because if you ask all your questions now, that will put us in our head, and we'll ask Sarah as the
Okay.
presentations go on. Is council okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
But
With
Mr. Mayor,
regard-
if we could have a formal motion and vote on that so that we have it reflected in the minutes.
Great, another 5 minutes?
Mayor, yeah, I'd make a motion, we add additional 5 minutes.
So can I'm so sorry to interrupt. So it says 10 minutes per hour, per item, 2 minutes per person. So she has in the remaining, if we're going to extend it, we
Perfect.
have in the remaining 5:35.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to, if you would like to
Yeah,
do the
that'd
motion
be
on
great.
that, please.
So have her do the remaining 10 minutes of the item. All right.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There we go.
And I guess this is a point of order, because this agenda item incorporates a whole host of different agenda items. It seems a bit unnatural that you would only have 2 minutes for a constituent that wants to speak to a multitude of items that were never publicized. Just a point of order. Sometimes this roundabout, and I wanted to follow up on one of the points made about backing up with regards to Hopewell and Bethany. Actually, not Bethany and Hopewell and Bethany at that new roundabout. Similarly, and I have mentioned to Ms. Leaders, the current roundabout under construction at Hickory Flat and Birmingham Highway actually has caused more backup some mornings than it has helped. We've had a discussion that it's because the radius of that circle is not as great. And so folks coming from north to south, from Cherokee headed south, actually have no intention of stopping. So not every morning, but some mornings, and having a drone to observe that would be helpful. The backup has been way past the fire station, and that was never the issue with a four-way stop. So I just think that there may be an opportunity to enhance that traffic flow as was intended, and I think we've had some unintended consequences simply because it is small, and I get that, but I think there's some ways to improve that. I feel certain that Ms. Leaders has some ideas around that. Moving to bridges, I've mentioned in prior council meetings, along with many citizens, that we do have some concerns about bridges identified for quote-unquote improvements, given said improvements can lead to unnecessarily wide bridges and designs that are not in keeping with the rural nature of much of our community. Additionally, such widening can actually increase the speeds on our roadways rather than work in tandem with other efforts to reduce speeds on our rural roads. I continue to ask for your careful consideration in accepting state and federal funds, as the receipt of these funds often comes at the cost of giving up our autonomy to design bridges, as but one example, in a way that is rule by design rather than simply according to the state or federal agencies who do not have rule by design as part of their vernacular. Their goals may not align with our community at all, in fact. As an example, the state and federal bridge designs are likely to increase cross-community traffic, including large trucks. I was certainly pleased to hear some discussion and a confirmation from staff that we will continue to keep our roadways as noted as no truck routes, absolutely, and we need that in writing, confirmed. This is certainly not aligned with Milton's goals of preventing many of our roadways from being truck route restricted. I'd also ask that we need enforcement for truck restricted roads. That enforcement does not happen. It needs to. If we don't have enforcement, we may as well not have non-truck routes in place. And the design of our bridges certainly impacts this directly. So again, I just ask for your careful consideration as we move towards accepting or not accepting state and federal funds. I'll save my comments on signage. If I heard you directly, you want me to save my comments on signage?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Honor Bailey. Okay, will you please call the
That
next?
concludes public comment.
Okay, will you please call the next item, and might have a couple questions for Sarah.
The next item is discussion of the draft comprehensive transportation plan projects. Ms. Sarah Leaders.
Hey, Sarah, real quick on one of the items that Ms. Honor Bailey mentioned was that landscaping at Birmingham Highway and Hickory Flat. So GDOT's saying they're just gonna do just the concrete, I guess.
Right, for it to be the mini roundabout with the design specs that they use, the center has to be completely mountable by the types of vehicles that would be on the state route traveling through. So it is a completely concrete center.
Was it fair to say that our mini roundabout design standards are different than the state?
They could be. They could
Okay.
be. Our design vehicle is typically different. GDOT has to accommodate the largest vehicle that could be on the state route, whereas we can be more selective that we want to, like some of ours, we've made sure that a truck could utilize certain pieces of that truck apron to make their maneuvers, but we don't necessarily design that that's the easiest path for that size vehicle. So.
Sarah, is it possible to do landscaping around the outside of the circle, not in the inside, but where the streets come together?
There is.
So that we get that look and feel we're looking for without putting something in the very middle?
We could, yes.
Keeping on the landscape design question, the corner that is the southwest corner where the smaller real estate development is happening today, the corner itself at one point was privately held by a local family. I believe it's corporately owned or has been for a while. I think maybe Walgreens owned it at one point. Do you know if that's still the case? The reason I'm asking is, I guess to finish the question or finish the thought, is that because it's not locally owned anymore, it doesn't meet the expectations of what maintained property would look like there. And it has fallen into,
It looks terrible.
it's untidy. It's just, yeah, it's overgrown and whatever. So with the completion of this, if there's any landscape plan there, I would hope that we would hold the corporate entity, whoever that might be, responsible for ensuring that that corner now meets our expectations. You look at the beautification being done with all the other corners. let's ensure that they are held to the same standard.
And the wall that's on the other side, I'm assuming they did that because they had to widen the road and that was the need for that wall?
They're using some similar in the Highway 9 section in Alpharetta that has to do with the project impacts to the parking that's very close to the roadway. And we haven't gotten the details on exactly why that wall is needed. Once the project's done, it does it is our right of way. That section of Hickory Flat is, and so we have the ability to change it, to modify. But based on DOT's, all their design guides, it had to do with, I believe, with proximity of some of that parking on that adjacent parcel to the right of way and almost protecting
At the
that
very
area.
least, could we go in and put a stone front on that just to change the
Or remove
appearance?
it, or remove it.
Or remove it. I mean,
That
I just-
particular engineering concept from the Georgia DOT, whether it's Highway 9 or anywhere, is inexplicable to me. It just seems to have no purpose in so many applications of it. Some are gigantic walls and some are smaller. It's just, they
They're into
create an
building- they're into
eyesore
building
when
walls.
one wasn't necessary. So I hope once it's ours, we'll take a hard look at that.
You can let the engineers work their magic on that.
Yeah.
We have a project bucket you'll hear about that we call it quick response, which usually means it's a easier, lower cost project to do that we almost thought about calling it fixing the aesthetics of what GDOT constructs for us. We have that component we've got a specific one for Highway 9, we've got one for bridges, and now we're looking at one for not only Birmingham Crossroads, but there's some components here in Crabapple. There's a wall that we're just left with a plain concrete wall. So looking at improving some of those more standardized transportation features. So we were hoping that could possibly fall under this quick response bucket that you'll see in our CTP. But if there's an interest in calling that out separately as a streetscape, we could do that as well.
For minimal or no cost, I suggest you host Sledgehammer Saturday. And all the locals with their sledgehammers would be happy to show up and take down that wall. Just, it's a silly wall.
It's ugly.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to give Rob Del Ross credit. He's been heavily involved in this transportation plan. He couldn't be here tonight. I was going to let him do the presentation here, but he was not able to be here. I also wanted to recognize our consultant partner on this, who I will turn it over to in a minute, Christina Pastor with Kimley Horn, who has been part of, this is now our third transportation plan and our third that Christina has been involved in. So we're excited to present some draft proposals for your consideration tonight, and I will turn it over to Christina.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's really exciting to be back here yet again in front of you. So we just want to be able to talk through a number of different things on where we are with the comprehensive transportation plan. We're going to talk through a little bit on goals, because we know that's where it's important to start every transportation plan. Talk through some of the work on existing conditions that's been going on, some input that we received in our first round of engagement with the public. And then we'll start to talk through some of the financial framework, recommendations, and draft that we are going out to the public with currently. So as I mentioned, it's important to start every transportation plan with some direction setting, some visioning. And so what you have here is the 6 overarching transportation goals for the plan. In the box at the beginning, you'll see the number of different plans that we reviewed as a part of this process. We don't want to start from scratch. Milton has been doing, well, it sounds really weird if I say Milton's been doing great planning, but I think Milton has been doing great planning over the years. And so we want to be able to build upon that. First and foremost, on the strategic plan that the council put together. And so that's a piece of it. The previous transportation plan from 2016, the 2040 comprehensive land use plan, and then also some of the other smaller plans, the local road safety plan, the trail blueprint, the PTV plan, and then also the larger North Fulton CTP. So building upon those, we identified 6 overarching goals. The first, to reduce congestion along key corridors. This is a larger type of goal, larger roadway projects. The second is improving traffic operations at intersections, so a little bit more narrow focused, detailed right in at the intersections. Increasing safety for all users, not just the people that are driving in cars, but also the people who are using the transportation system. Tied to that then is enhancing infrastructure for pedestrians, cyclists, equestrians, and transit users. The fifth is then to balance mobility with Milton's continued striving to be able to remain a rural community. And so making sure that we're balancing those mobility decisions with the character. And then finally, making sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpaying dollars, taking care of the infrastructure that exists, and making good financial decisions. This we wanted to make sure to point out for goal 5 within the strategic plan. You can see those red arrows. These are some of the places that we are specifically targeting in the CTP that relates back to the strategic plan. So taking very serious consideration of that direction from council. Now, one of the first things, something is weird about our presentation, it's shrunken. So Milton looks a little skinnier in these pictures. We're not really sure why, but I guess it got a little bit of a road diet itself. So one of the first things that we did was to take a look at what has happened since the last plan. So one of the things that we like to do is to take a look at what were we projecting from a traffic perspective and where do we see traffic today? And it's interesting, but also not terribly surprising, that the places where you see those red dots, the higher than projected traffic, is in the more densely developed area of the city, particularly in the Deerfield areas. You get closer to 400 and getting down into Alpharetta. But really, when you look at the central part of the city and up to the north, the traffic has grown less than the model may have projected for the rest of the city. So that's exciting to see. One of the other things that we've been doing closely with support from the city staff is tracking how the different projects from the last plan are being implemented. So you can see the dark green ones at the bottom are projects that have already been completed from the last CTP. The ones that are the next color of green are those that are active. And then the final ones, the lightest green color, those that have not yet been initiated. There's been tremendous implementation. Even the projects that Sarah was just talking about that are already part of the T-SPLOS 2 that are already underway. Tremendous implementation on the part of the city. So I think it's really exciting to see that. Now, as a part of our existing conditions analysis, we are looking at a number of different things. So population and demographic changes over the course of the last few years, as well as projecting population out to the future. We've been working a lot with staff and pulling from the comp plan as well for consistency. We're taking a look at land use changes and market changes also from the comprehensive land use plan, and then doing a larger update on transportation, roadway, bicycle, pedestrian, and transit. You can see some of the examples of maps. There's lots and lots of maps, lots and lots of data in the plan in this existing conditions report. The nice thing is we've been able to leverage some new data sources that didn't exist in the past. One of those is using probe data, actual like GPS data from people that are traveling. So we can see where bottlenecks are happening as they're taking place. So that's really powerful data that we can use from a planning perspective. When it comes to getting public input, we've had one round of engagement so far. The first was to really gather needs from the community. So we've been working with Greg and your communication staff. He's been a phenomenal partner in being able to help get the word out to the community. So newsletters, social media, different things like that. We hosted 4 focus group meetings, one with Crabapple residents, one with Deerfield residents, one was with the bicycle and pedestrian communities, and then one was with the presidents of the HOAs that were invited. We also conducted an intercept at the farmers market, and we're able to talk some residents as they were just going about their daily or weekly shopping at the market, and then also had an online survey, which we know a lot of Milton residents enjoy being able to provide their feedback online. So we got some great feedback in that first round. Some of what we heard. One is we asked people to kind of rank the goals, and what you can see here is some weighted. It's not the direct score, but it's weighted. So if somebody said something was their primary goal, it was weighted as more points than something was the last goal. So you can see that reducing congestion, both long corridors and intersections, is really important to folks. Things like enhancing infrastructure for other users, non-drivers, is also really important, and safety coming in next to that. One of the interesting things is while reducing congestion along key corridors was number one, we also asked people to tell us if they got to be in charge of Milton for the day and they had to spend $100, how would they spend their money? The largest bucket was actually for intersection improvements. So while we saw people prioritizing kind of those larger corridor investments, they really wanted to put their money into intersection improvements more. So it's, I think a little bit of is a little bit of an understanding of the character and some of the transportation decisions on how we reduce congestion, but in the context of a place like Milton. The other thing that we asked folks to do was to give us some feedback on where they saw transportation needs. So the map on the left, you can see some of the roadway points where they were placed around the city. And then also on the right, transit, pedestrian, and bicycle improvements. So lots of great information. We used this to help develop our project list. I'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so I want to start talking now about, as we move into project recommendations, how are we doing that? We want to make sure we have a financially constrained plan. It's obviously not an actual fixed, this isn't an official budget, but it gives us a framework to be able to work around. So what you see on the screen here, there are 3 levels. Those levels refer to the CTP, but in the process, we are incorporating the T-SPLOST 2 budget that you already have. So your level 1 is your short range projects, and then incorporates both tier 1 and tier 2 of your T-SPLOST. So your first 85% of revenues plus your extra 15% to get you to 100%. So level 1 of the CTP, $36 million, accounts for both tier 1 and tier 2 of your T-SPLOST. Level 2 is the next 5 years, that 5 to 10 year time frame. It's the extra overage for tier 3 if you happen to have revenues that come in above and beyond the original projection for your T-SPLOST 2. And then the remaining piece of that is that roughly $33 million left over. So for a total mid-range dollar amount of $38 million. Level 3 is a 10-year time frame. It doesn't include any of the T-SPLOST because that's beyond that time frame. But for that, we're looking at about $80 million, just to give us something to work toward. When we break that down one next step, one of the things that we did was look at both projects and funding buckets. Sarah's talked a little bit about some of those set-asides. You'll see on the right-hand side, there's a list of bulleted items: bridges, guardrail improvements, pavement, sidewalk gaps, that planning, quick response, local road safety plan implementation, and program management. So in that case, we're not planning specific guardrail improvements as a part of the CTP. We're just making sure that the funding is set aside so that the staff, in concert with the council, can make sure that the money is set aside to be able to do those things. So what you can see in the middle column there is the funding of the total revenue dedicated to program set-asides. The remaining amount then on the right-hand side of the table is what remains for projects. So that's what we're using for identifying how much money we have for actual capital investments. When it comes to developing our project list, we want to start with kind of what we call our universe of projects. So we identified 5 different categories of projects: roadway corridor projects, in some case capacity, that's where we're actually adding lanes. We didn't anticipate we would find many of those, but we went ahead and included them, as well as operational improvements. So it might be a longer corridor with medians, turn lanes, things like that. We have roadway intersection projects, and then bicycle pedestrian, which we include sidewalk crossing projects, and then multi-use trails. So 5 different categories, and we try to build those from the ground up. So we start with previous plans, we add new projects from our analysis, add on input from the public, and then we had a workshop with staff where we worked for about a half a day on making sure that we had a comprehensive list of potential projects to be included. From there, we evaluated the projects, and I won't go through all of these. You have them obviously in front of you. But the idea was we developed metrics based on the goals that we identified, those 6 goals that I mentioned at the beginning of the plan, identifying potential metrics then to evaluate projects to make sure that the projects that we select are ones that are helping us to reach the goals. So those were the different metrics that we used to evaluate projects and to score them. And from that point, we then worked through with the city to work through the different projects. So I'm going to turn over to Sarah, and she's going to talk you through our 3 levels.
Okay, so I'm going to skip over the projects that I talked about already. I showed you on the ClearGov that were programmed for T-SPLOST 2 and just highlight some of the new identified projects. Let's see, we'll begin with a couple partner projects that we're looking at. Batesville at 372 has, we've heard a lot about that one lately, related to some recent traffic accidents as well as speeds on Birmingham Highway. So looking at getting a partner project with DOT to look at a major improvement there. We did partner with DOT on the left turn lane a few years ago, but this would be a much larger project to address operations safety at that location. Another partner project is 140 at Cox. Like I mentioned, we studied it for an initial concept, but we really want to go back to DOT and talk about a funding agreement and partnership on creating a project there. Batesville at Taylor, that's one of intersections we are counting, and Kimberly Horn's going to help us with some recommendations for how to improve the visibility as well as operations at that intersection. Wood Road at 372, that one we wanted to look at improving. Again, it's got some visibility challenges, so improving really visibility at that, and there could be some minor operational type improvements. Let's see, we talked about Dinsmore already. Red Road, we are looking at making some improvements along Red Road. We already have a project for Freemanville at Red. We're looking at Thompson and where Haygood comes in and where it connects Hopewell. That's one of the corridors we've talked about with our Trails Committee for looking at some sidewalk connections on one side to get some loops to the gravel road network. From the roadway standpoint, we're looking at those key intersections and maybe some turn lanes or things we could do to the roadway to just improve safety along that corridor. I think that covers all of those. Bethany Way at Haygood and Bethany Road. Now that Hopewell Bethany roundabout and turn lanes are completed, it has changed traffic flow to that location. In addition, with Bethany at Providence coming along with a roundabout, we felt this one could use a look at operations and possibly a right turn lane, maybe some change in which direction stops. So probably a lower cost intersection improvement, but one that has some attention brought to it now that traffic flow has changed some. Hopewell Road, we're looking at some just a variety of improvements from the city limits all the way up to Red, from operations to just a look at safety and speeds and looking at reducing some of the travel speeds along that roadway as a standalone project. A few years ago, we created a project for Lower Hopewell traffic calming around some of the neighborhoods there with some pedestrian crossings and sidewalk connections. So that'll feed into this proposed project as well. Highway 9, this project is to enhance the State Route 9 widening with the rock facing on the walls with some streetscapes, some plantings. So we've identified some funding to support that widening project. P5, this one here on Bethany Bend, this is that sidewalk connection Councilmember Morag you mentioned earlier, connecting from the Avonsong intersection down to McGinnis. So that project we have identified for pedestrian improvements. Let's see, those are underway. State Route 372 school zone. So we are looking at basically a right turn stacking lane from School Drive all the way down to the elementary school. It'll help with that high school and middle school queuing. It'll get those cars that want to enter the school separated. It'll also add multi-use paths on one or both sides of the road to provide that bicycle, pedestrian, and even possibly the PTV connection down to Crabapple. So that is this project. And then 372 at Green, hopefully at the next council meeting, we'll have an agenda item to talk more about that concept. But DOT has identified a signal as the preferred concept. We've asked them to take a second look at possibly a roundabout there in the future. We do still feel like there needs to be a shorter term solution. So we are proposing that DOT would fund the signal. We would just do the plans for it. So very low cost to us. And then they would fund the signal through their quick response program, with the idea that they're still looking at a bigger improvement there with a roundabout. All right, I think I've talked through all of them.
Sarah, I have a question for you. When you're looking at these roadways where you want to improve the ability for bicycle, are you looking at widening those roads or just striping it or a combination of the two?
I think it's a combination, and the cycling community has expressed an interest in what they call like a bikeable shoulder, not a full bike lane. There's been some input that a full bike lane almost makes vehicles go faster because there's so much more pavement. Whereas if you narrow the lane a little bit, you make this a little bit of a wider shoulder, like 18 to 24 inches, just to give a little extra room for the cyclists. That has been the feedback we've heard thus far on what's the preferred infrastructure.
When we go in and do that, though, we don't necessarily we're not going to add curbing in those areas, are we?
No.
Okay.
No. And it's ideally done when a road reaches the point that it needs full depth reconstruction, because it's much easier to build out that little additional shoulder when you're rebuilding the road. So it works best in those situations. So knowing which roads are designated for where there's frequent cyclists helps us to plan with the full depth reconstruction.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I think I touched on all on level 1. Any further input? We'll relook at the description of P5, which is the Bethany Bend, to see if the south side, see how that one was called out. P5, sidewalk gap filling on the north side of Bethany Bend, east of State Route 9.
Oh, Sarah, I had one question. On that
Yes.
roundabout at Crabapple, in front of Six Bridges, you mentioned there might be or is there a plan for that to kind of reduce that roundabout?
That one DOT is looking at
Yeah.
as a project to possibly change those dual entries into where the outside lane is a right turn only and the inside lane is your only through. So
Okay.
they're working on programming the next steps of that.
That's a GDOT plan.
That is all GDOT.
Okay.
Yep. All right.
So the road to safety and speed stuff is still coming up, correct? Is that in D?
We had a bucket for local road safety plan implementation. So we do have that set aside for to support. We did ask for grant funding for all of Freemanville and I think the northern section of Hopewell to look at some of those corridor looks at speed and some safety type improvements. So
Okay. Yeah,
Hey, Sarah, sorry, Paula.
I was going to say, just to finish that thought, you are already sensitive to the requests that I've made previously, so thank you for acknowledging those roadways in your comments just now. Those are also some of the highly populated bike path areas, so I just look forward to making sure that we accelerate our plans to get there as soon as possible. Thanks.
Sarah, when you list them as level 1 short range, is the short range, can you kind of frame the time frame around that? Is that 1 year to 1 to 5 years, 1 to
it
3
is
years?
1 to
Okay.
5
Okay.
is the short range.
Thanks.
Right. Now we move into the mid-range. So this is anticipating a next round of T-SPLOST. So programming a slightly increased funding number for what some improvements could look like in that next phase. We have and I don't think I've talked about any of these yet. So we have Mountain Road at Freemanville, just possibly a realignment. That's an odd skew that those come in at. So it's likely just a reshifting how they join. Francis at Thompson, just that might be some turn lanes. It came up through some of our scoring as well as our public outreach for some possible operational improvements there. Hopewell Francis Cogburn, that's an existing roundabout. We had planned in the initial design for a bypass to get for those traveling north on Cogburn to get over to Francis without really having to enter the roundabout, almost a bypass lane. So this project would install that phase to the roundabout. Then we have New Providence. So to complete the multi-use path first of all, from the roundabout to Providence, Atlanta National, and possibly a crossing there. And then the second project is to get all the way down to Providence Plantation. That would need to go hand in hand with looking at the bridge at New Providence. It is on our radar for upgrade in the future, so getting that pedestrian accommodations across that bridge would help get this multi-use path completed there. Got a project to connect Providence Park down to the sidewalks that exist in Alpharetta. So that southern section of Providence Road. Cogburn Road, we have the Big Creek Greenway project on the west side. So this is a short sidewalk project on the east side connecting the Hermitage neighborhood up to Cambridge High School. We have would need to be worked out as redevelopments take place along Highway 9 and Deerfield Parkway, but possibly a off-road kind of greenway connection. Again, a partnership project as developments take place to get some sort of off-road trail connection through that Highway 9 area. And
Sir, I know we've got green space off from Webb Road. Is that anything that I know we talked, I think, there's space that is owned by a POA, I think. Have we had any discussions about trying to connect? Because it seemed like that would almost take us all the way over to Cogburn Road, but then bridge through that nature area over to Webb Road. Is that something we can look at?
we can, with the green print, we did have some residents from that neighborhood come out to our public meeting, and we started that conversation, and I'll let Emily touch on that a little bit when we get to the green print, but
I jumped ahead.
no, that one's another good off-road type location that we could look at.
Great.
And then Bethany Bend, I believe we had that one proposed as kind of a complete street look at that whole segment of roadway to look at possibly additional mini roundabouts, to look at multi-use paths, really just to change the feel of that roadway and make it almost less appealing for those leaving McGinnis Ferry to use to get over to 9, make it more of a residential type roadway. So we have that one identified as well.
And again, on that, the change of the actual alignment of the road, we're still tied up with GDOT. It's not going to do anything on either west or the east side of Bethany Bend until we actually have the widening come up there. That's when they're going to put the in.
Right. Okay. And this is just a list describing the projects that I just went through. And level 2 is that mid-range really it's the next round of T-SPLOST. So we're looking at least 5 to 10 years out on these. And lastly is the longer range. This is even beyond that next T-SPLOST. And so what we'd identified here is a couple other intersections, possibly looking at Henderson, Birmingham, Cogburn, the section between Francis and Bethany Bend, looking at that possible non-interchange connection over 400 It's an extension of Webb Road. This has always been an aspirational project, but in this longer range time frame bucket, that one might be one to look at with some possible partnership funding there as well. And then a roadway connection between Deerfield and Highway 9.
That's something that we can use T-Splosh funds for if we to look at
We
that
could.
bridge to go over 400.
We could.
That would be second crossing that would almost get us to the Greenway
Mhm.
connection in Alpharetta versus having to go McGinnis Ferry and over that direction.
It would, yes. Be good to have another non-interchange. Right now we have Winnard and McGinnis are the only two. They're both going to be interchanges. So to have a multi-use roadway, vehicular, pedestrian connection that's not at an interchange would be a big benefit to both Milton and Alpharetta. So possibly looking at some partnerships to move that one ahead. All right, and lastly is our initial take at bicycle routes. So we had one of the focus group meetings with the cycling community, had some good input from that, and we took some data that was gathered in the 2016 transportation plan that talked about some priority routes for cyclists. And Christina may have some more to add to this one. I'll let her jump in here in a minute, but as well as looking at the Strava, that's the devices that track bicycle routes that a lot of riders have apps that talk to Strava. So looking at where there's currently bicyclists, and then again, that focus group heavily influenced what we're proposing as some of our initial bicycle routes. This is the first time we're showing this as a possible recommendation. So we're definitely open for some feedback on what these routes look like. And this is just the first step in getting something on paper and then getting more outreach with the bicycling community. So I'll let Christina add anything to that one. And then I think we're on our last slide here.
A quick question on that. When you say bicycle routes, is it kind of like our truck routes? I mean, how is it like against the law to go on a non-bicycle route, or is it just more of this is the city of Milton's bicycle routes, this is our preference? Is that?
It's more of a preference and for where we're going to focus education and signage and markings, that sort of thing.
I see Freemanville being one of those, which is one of our high-speed areas at this point in time. I know we're looking at trying to reduce speed. So would this be something where we'd be looking at putting a dedicated bike lane off to the side?
I think it would be more of that bikeable shoulder is again the infrastructure that we've been talking
Like
about.
a dash line or whatever it would be, but not separate from the road, but connected, widening the road so you'd actually have a shoulder to ride on versus fighting the traffic.
Right, like New Providence is a good example where when we did our full depth reconstruction, narrowed the lanes a little bit, did that 18 to 24 inch shoulder. So that's more of the treatment that we'd be looking for. But as we know, we're coming up on needing to do a bigger pavement treatment on Freemanville with that full depth reconstruction. So this would be the time. If it's on a bike route, it definitely supports. That's another box that it checks with the repaving is we get a new surface, we get that bikeable shoulder, and it's on our bike route. So.
I had questions. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Sure, a quick comment while you're still at the microphone is I like some of the stuff that I'm seeing here, but one of my gut reactions to this is there are very few closed loops. There's a lot of extended roadways, which is great to get some distance for these for the cycling community, but there, as you get into some of the northern reaches, to just look at closing the loops on those as soon as we can, so they've got a circular way.
Right. That's one thing we looked at was either, getting a route that then ran into an adjoining county or city, like Freemanville up to Mountain. Mountain is one of the roads I think that is
Right.
utilized as well, or continuing on up into Forsyth and Cherokee. And yeah, we tried to either have a loop or have a logical connection to a adjoining municipality as well.
Yeah, and just like Dinsmore, or going all the way up to Birmingham and going all across over to, what is it, Thompson? just a couple of natural loops right there to take a look at.
Yeah, Dinsmore does look like a logical one
Mhm.
that'll provide lots of mileage and loops there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to reinforce that Sarah mentioned is, right now, we know there's a lot of conflicts that occur between drivers and cyclists. And so being able to have something posted, that you've got signage, you can educate the public that if you're going to drive on this road, be on alert, right? There, you expect to see someone on their bicycle versus some of the other routes that maybe the cyclists know, maybe this isn't the best route to be on because chances are people are going to be traveling a little faster maybe than we might want to share the road with. So a lot of this also gets to an education and the ability to have some education and enforcement. So
I think, at least my observation is there's always a push and a pull. They have to share the road. But we run into problems if we don't have a bikeable shoulder so people can go into a single file, because then the bikers, for their own safety, end up staying too wide and out into the road. And that's when we start to get back up. And that's when you start hearing from angry motorists. And the bikers are saying, we're going to do it because we don't want to get killed. I mean, I've heard both sides going back and forth. So Sarah, when we look at the repavement, if we can be intentional and do something like that, I know other cities have done it. I've seen it down by Gainesville. It makes it just much more safer for both types of vehicles.
and there's, a lot of these roads are very winding, right? So, there's some sharp turns. And so that complicates things further than just having kind of a straighter road. So
The one question I've heard from the bikers is, they have those indentions on the end. So when you're a driver and you're going off the road, you kind of hear it, which
the rumble
is a great,
strips.
I love it because it's a great safety measure. But I guess there's not enough room for the bikers
Right.
on the other side. So is that something, Sarah, that y'all, when you're doing this?
Yeah, our local road safety plan, we specifically said no rumble strips on the edge line, but we did recommend them for the center line. So if a vehicle does go over the center line to pass the cyclist, they're still going to encounter them. But the cyclists, we specifically did not recommend those rumble strips on the edge lines.
We have bikers like destroying their tires if they're.
Yeah.
Now, the state did some on 372 when they repaved, they put center line and edge line. But our recommendation has been, if we're going to look at them, we target which roads we look at them on, and we only do center line.
final slide. So what we have coming, slide went away.
It'll just be a minute.
There we go.
Well, it was the final slide.
Literally, the final slide. So where we are now in terms of reaching out to the public and getting feedback, we are conducting community intercepts. We were actually just out at Crabapple Fest this weekend. It was beautiful weather and lots of opportunity for engagement. Got to talk to probably a couple hundred folks and got a lot of good impact and a lot of good inputs. We also are going out to the Cambridge High School football game this Friday, and we'll be engaging with some sports enthusiasts as well. We have a public meeting that we're going to be hosting here at City Hall on October 24th. And our online survey actually opened on Saturday with the goal then of encouraging folks who maybe didn't want to hang out and give us all their input at Crabapple Fest to be able to go home and take that. So the QR code that you see there is the link that will take you right to the survey. And lots more information is also provided on the website so that people can see the detailed project lists and be able to give more informed feedback. After we receive all of the input from the community and from the council, we'll be going through project revisions. We'll be working on policy recommendations and then working to put a final recommendations document together and hoping to come back to council in December for final adoption. So.
Thank you. Tammy, do you have any public comment on the draft comprehensive transportation plan?
Yes, I'd like to invite Miss Julie Zonner Bailey. Can we go ahead and do the vote for 10 minutes?
Sure.
Can I have that
Do we need a
motion?
vote? Okay.
I make
Goodbye,
a
good.
motion that we, 10 minutes?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Julie Zonner Bailey, 255 Hickory Flat Road, Milton, Georgia, 30004. One, just thank you for the updates we just heard. One thing that struck me is that 372 school zone, and Sarah, I don't know if you can speak to this after, but I don't know if I can envision, I guess it's a new lane that would go from Crabapple Elementary to School Drive, is that correct? So it would be an additional lane in addition to what's there currently? That just strikes me as something that I'd like to certainly see what that would look like. I'd also like to suggest really low-hanging fruit with regards to mornings and afternoons on 372 and School Drive. We have a safety ambassador, as some of us used to know, was a crossing guard. I'd like to strongly recommend that we educate our crossing guards and our safety ambassadors. As I'm driving south on 372 to get to school, oftentimes there's a green light and traffic heading south or north is not allowed to go through the light when the light is green because the safety guard comes out and stops traffic during the green light for one student to cross the lane, to cross the road. I think we can do better and it won't cost us a cent. We just need to educate when do we allow a crossing guard to allow students to cross. They should cross when the light is red. I've sat literally through 4, 5 iterations of the light heading south. We can improve our traffic simply that way. I've thought about stopping myself and having that conversation, or maybe just being the crossing guard for a day, but I've resisted doing that. But I would ask that we please educate when and where we should allow students to cross. It's so simple, and we just need to do that so that we can allow traffic to move on our current roadways. But I would love to see some more information about that 372 school zone and basically widening of 372 there. I am a little bit concerned about what that's going to do to the look and feel. I realize that's always a trade-off, but I think we need a bit more information about that short-term info. And I also like the comment about bicycle paths. I think we do need to think about how do we find that balance between cyclists who certainly need to be safe and those of us still traveling the roadways and the ability to get from point A to point B. I do still want to speak to speed reductions, and I think that falls in line with safer roadways. I don't know if now is the time to speak to speed reductions, or if Ms. Leaders, if you're going to speak to that later.
Go ahead and speak about it now.
Okay. Again, just trying to follow the order that you guys present. In terms of speed reductions on our roadways, they're important. They're critical, in fact. Thank you very much to staff for the work on this topic to date. I know that there are several roadways that are in process of being reduced. I'm aware that the next round of roadways proposed for speed reduction include Hickory Flat Road, among others. I ask that all of Hickory Flat Road be reduced to 35 miles per hour. Just inside of Cherokee County, after crossing the Hickory Flat Bridge, the posted speed limit there is 35 miles per hour. Approaching the first subdivision further east on Hickory Flat Road, once in Milton, there are signs to reduce speed to 35 miles per hour. And approaching the Milton Fire Station 43, I believe there are also signs indicating a reduction of speed to 35 miles per hour. And of course, as you now approach the newest roundabout at Hickory Flat Road, there are now signs that indicate we should reduce speed to 20 miles per hour. So to have speeds of 45 miles per hour in between the 35 miles per hour up until we get to the 20 miles per hour simply makes no sense. It's confusing, it's inconsistent, it's confusing to drivers, and it certainly is not consistent with that residential rural area. So please, as we consider Hickory Flat Road, hopefully in the short term, we can see that reduced to a full 35 miles per hour in and amongst other areas for consideration. So thank you for consideration on speed reduction. Would this be the time that you would want me to speak about signage as it relates to signage at roundabouts, as well as some other signage along our transportation corridors, or would you rather me speak to that later?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Signage. Signage is a visual interruption of the natural beauty of our community. More is not better. In fact, less is better. Where possible, please help to ensure that the city does not add to the visual clutter of more signage when not absolutely necessary. Whether it be the size of street signs, signage on bridges, signage entering the city from other communities, signage approaching roundabouts, signage in the middle of roundabouts, signage leaving the roundabouts, you get the point. In many instances, signage seems to be truly out of hand. I ask that there be intention around where signs are and where they perhaps should not be, and where perhaps they could be removed. Some immediate examples that come to mind include the roadway signs in Crabapple as you're approaching the Crabapple Birmingham intersection. Those signs are effectively the size of highway signs. Several years ago, it was noted, it was brought to staff, and we were told that those signs would be removed and smaller, more appropriate signs would be put in place. That candidly hasn't happened. That's easy, low-hanging fruit. It really should happen. It was promised that it would. I ask that that be considered. Signage approaching and at roundabouts, it's too much and too many. The more roundabouts we have, the more signage that we seem to be getting. I think that we as a community understand roundabouts. We know that we're approaching them. Yes, there certainly needs to be some signage for safety, but again, it is candidly kind of out of hand. I also question the need for advertising at our roundabouts. I'm sure that it was well-intended initially, but I would ask that this be reconsidered by council and the mayor and staff, as it is a visual clutter that is inconsistent with the rule by design expectation of citizens. We have third-party contracts with entities who are supposed to be cleaning and keeping clean our roadways and effectively also the roundabouts, rather than allowing the roundabouts to be used for business advertisements. It's as though we're now allowing many billboards in and around our community. It certainly seems inconsistent to this citizen and others that I hear from with regards to our sign ordinance and importantly, citizen expectations. Please reconsider this before the visual clutter continues to get more out of hand at more of our roundabouts in some of our most rural areas. It doesn't make sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, will you please call the next item?
Mayor, the next item is the update on the green print. Miss Sarah Leaders, oh, I'm sorry, Miss Emily Groth.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Let's switch gears here a little bit.
The work session, I don't know if it. I have to use the restroom. Oh, wait. Oh, now, I'll hold it.
So tonight I'm here to provide an update on the green space plan.
Oh,
Can
we're,
we
we're,
wait?
we're waiting until we have a quorum.
Oh, sorry.
Did you bring puppets?
But
Did you bring puppets?
not, no. Test.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Test.
But a little louder.
Test.
There you go.
There we go. That was a short joke.
Braves are getting killed.
They are.
Yeah,
Was it, there was 3-0.
yeah, 3-0. They used all their runs during the year.
Sorry?
They used all their runs during
I
the
was
year.
going to say, same thing.
How
Yeah.
can a team that was so hot through most of the season play so bad in the playoffs? It's terrible. Today, Rick.
Hey, Rick.
Rick, we're waiting
We're
for you.
Oh, I didn't know you were waiting.
All
Corn.
right, Emily, let's do it.
Okay. So tonight we have a green space plan, green print update.
No?
We originally discussed this project and planning initiative in February. So I wanted to bring you guys up to speed and provide a brief history of what I know the council is familiar with, the green space bond, the acquisition history, briefly review the current status of these properties, and then dive into where we are on the green print. And we've got some feedback and questions for you at the end of the presentation to help guide next steps in the planning process. So briefly, in 2016, 82% of voters approved 25 million in bonds to acquire conservation land for the purposes listed here, directly included in the ballot language. These bullets were voted on directly, this verbiage: recreational trails, natural areas and wildlife habitat, agricultural land, protecting water quality, and providing parks and parks improvements. Upon approval of the bond, we established the Milton Green Space Advisory Committee in 2017. And since then, we've spent 20 million through 8 purchases, 6 properties total, and totaling more than 400 acres. Some of these properties are open, some of them are partially open, and some of them remained closed still. This is just an overview of these properties, and it was important during the acquisition period that the council decided to disperse these properties throughout all regions of Milton. So our open properties include the pasture-like green space at the intersection of Freemanville, Birmingham, the newly named Lacapani Preserve, and the Milton City Park and Preserve. The closed properties include the green space off of Hamby Road, Webb Road, and the Cooper Sandy green space seen at the intersection of Providence and Bethany. This project comes from our strategic plan, Goal 5, to protect and enhance Milton's green spaces. It's a plan to identify appropriate usage, management, possible improvements that respect Milton's rural heritage and align with sustainable best practices. Some of the key elements that we've identified and focused our planning efforts on include potential future improvements, conservation areas and environmental protection, proposed access, parking, potential uses and amenities, and prioritization of these properties and timing and implementation of the plan. The key stakeholders that we've been working with include the city committees, namely the Green Space, Trails, Equestrian, and Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, as well as the property neighbors, who we've sent neighbor-specific survey to. The general public participated in so far 2 public input sessions and a community-wide survey. City Council for ongoing updates and guidance. And the planning staff include Public Works, Parks and Recreation, and the Communications Department. So what we've done so far is initial committee engagement earlier this year. We first introduced the plan on each committee agenda and provided initial discussions at the specific committee meetings. We also sent them a committee-specific survey tailored to that committee's interests. And now we are working with a committee steering group that was formed with 2 members from each of those 4 committees. Our surveys include a neighbor-specific survey that was sent to the directly adjacent neighbors of all of these properties and a community-wide survey. And so far, we've had 2 public input sessions. September 7th was really a blank slate for all these properties. It provided an aerial view and just explained existing features and was kind of a full menu of possibility and potential. September 25th, we gathered initial input based on the first meeting and the community survey and proposed various improvements and amenities and called out areas to continue guided feedback. And at that September 25th meeting, we noted an interest for the statue of the mayor at the Cooper Sandy property.
I second that.
I veto it.
So I wanted to go over the community survey results. So far, as of October 2nd, we've had 219 responses. This survey asked questions about access, use, the importance of the green space bond, and prioritization of many different features of those planning elements. So we first asked the community to rank and prioritize the language, that listed language from the ballot. So number 1 was trails. Number 2, most favored was habitat protection, then rural viewshed preservation, water quality protection, and parks improvements. We asked another question about additional environmental protection measures, with the most favored being some type of protection easement for legal protection in perpetuity at 80%. There was also interest in expanded stream buffer, wetland and flood protection, as well as increased landscaping policies like pesticide use or mowing schedules. We asked the questions, should some green space properties stay closed and inaccessible to the public, with 91% total support for a mixed-use balance of open and closed per property.
And when you say partially closed, what does that mean? I guess. I mean, I'm having a,
So I think that ties into one of the planning elements that we've blanketed across each property, what we're terming conservation areas, more so strictly for the intent of wildlife, and not prioritizing access or use in a delineated area for conservation or preservation.
like a delineated area within each kind of
Right.
one? Okay.
Mhm.
Does that also mean like at the Milton City Park and Preserve, we know we've got an entire section
Yeah.
that's intentionally undeveloped at this point. It remains fallow. Is that one way to look at that?
Yes, the Southwoods
Mhm.
of the property. Yeah, so for the entire Milton Country Club, we've prioritized the Southwoods as well as the Kennedy property, which didn't have a master plan outside of the former Milton Country Club master plan. So we've targeted those properties that haven't really been master planned so far.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it's forever. It's just planning and process, I guess, correct?
For the conservation areas?
Yeah, because I mean, I'm just saying like for the Kennedy property,
Yeah.
that was for access to the south portion.
Right, yeah, and
Okay.
some properties are more fitting towards a larger swath of proposed conservation.
Okay.
And some properties, it doesn't fit as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So then we asked some top 5 questions, amenities and infrastructure. The first one being natural surface hiking trails, and then wildlife and habitat improvements, restrooms, number 3, and then there was interest in picnic areas and some type of wildlife viewing amenities, education stations, and things like that. The top 5 activities and uses came in as fishing, equestrian trails, paddle sports, boating, canoeing, kayaking, mountain biking, and a potential dog park. This last question is more future focused and will come in handy when we have a more finalized plan, but we kind of asked, once we know the what, then we figure out the when. With that being open properties, kind of a mixed bag, number 2, taking the survey results and implementing that at the most suitable locations, opening closed properties, and potentially purchasing additional. So from the survey results and the 2 public input sessions, we've drafted these initial concept plans that are viewable on miltonga.gov/greenprint. And these are where some of the property-wide planning elements and buckets that we've identified per property come in. So I wanted to walk through an example with you on Hamby Road. This is one of the closed properties, and this is a good example where you can see all of these potential considerations. So starting with that conservation area, we've targeted here in green because most of this part of this property is in floodplain. So whether it be inaccessible or getting a boardwalk as opposed to a natural surface trail would assume more cost to get out there, is kind of how we've narrowed down where and when and how to put conservation areas. Expanded stream buffer protection, there was interest from the survey. So any GIS identified line that you see on these properties would assume an additional stream buffer. Land management is kind of a flexible consideration per property. At Hamby, it would target the rural view shed that was proposed in the ballot language. So this large swath of pink is what we've identified specifically for this property to maintain that rural view shed. Land management and other properties could mean native plantings, the Cooper Sandy property at the corner of Bethany and Providence, where our new roundabout is going. That is also land management. So it's not access, it's not a parking lot, but it's a notable feature of something that might happen or something that would need to happen to support the ballot language or support other interests. Also at each property, we've identified proposed access and parking. One of the biggest feedback that we've gotten so far about this topic is definitely buffered parking, hidden parking, maintaining the rural feel of each property. And we've identified some site-specific amenity areas, whether they are existing or proposed. So Hamby has both. Down here, it has an existing bridge, which is a neat feature. And so after we've carved out each of these considerations, we've proposed a general suitable location for a potential amenity, which we'd hope to target what the public would want to see there. So this is a 28-acre property, entirely closed to the public right now. So it's not as familiar with something like the Country Club or Freemanville, Birmingham. So out of this 28 acres, you'd get about 10 acres of that conservation area, just under 7 acres of expanded stream buffer, and 5.5 acres of that needed or desired land management, as well as a little over a quarter-mile trail.
Can you go back there again?
Yeah.
I guess I'm missing something here. Where would citizens be able to go? I mean, the conservation area is off limits. The expanded buffer, is that walkable or in this plan? Is that an area where citizens could go?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be like a specific ordinance protection. It would just be, the intent would be to maintain the water quality there. But there's possibilities to be able to do both access and water quality preservation.
So based on what you've got here, of the 28 acres, 18 of it would be where citizens can go, 10 of it, they would not.
Right, that's our initial proposal.
Okay.
And that kind of, those considerations in different buckets are blanketed across each property, flexible with the existing conditions that we know that exist on the property, and other workable features.
Okay.
Is the conservation area truly intended to be like unavailable to the community? I could get it from the standpoint of we're not going to plan any trails there. It's going to stay as natural as natural is. But if somebody were to choose to go off trail and just backpack into the woods, are we going to tell them they can't do that?
I don't know if we have an existing management like that on any of our other properties. So I think that would come down to considerations of like fencing or security, or additional management that we can work into future conversations.
And if somebody chooses to hike in at their own risk, there's no amenity. They
Right.
know, whatever you take in, you got to bring back out.
Right.
Like you do in some of the other national parks.
Mhm.
I think every square inch should be available.
Yeah, me too. If you choose to hike at your own risk, we have to make sure we're clear about what the city would like you to do versus what should be available to them. But I think every inch should be usable unless there's a specific danger hazard where you say this part's off limits.
And that kind of comes to play when we consider where this floodplain is or the difficulty to achieve access there.
Okay, thank you.
So our next steps is to continue to fine tune these concepts. And we had 2 more targeted questions for you that we can come back to after this second and third bullet. Regardless of what we do next, our next steps is to continue public input with reaching back out to the property owners, consolidating our fine-tuned input and concepts into another survey, and an additional public input session number 3. At that point, we'd consider additional council feedback and possible adoption. But we're at the point right now where we can continue fine-tuning these concepts, and we had 2 questions for you, and it speaks more targeted to these conservation areas. Should we engage and consult with possible partners within wildlife and conservation industries that can provide a little bit more expertise on when and how and what, and help us delineate and support what we're proposing, That's one question if we'd like to engage with organizations like that. And and my second question to you would be, would you like to go through tonight all of the initial proposed concepts that have been seen at that September 25th meeting? Keeping in mind that from that September 25th meeting, we do already have noted the areas for improvement. So we'd be going back and looking at what was already proposed initially at the 25th. So you can get your input, your fresh input on that now, or we can come back to you once we fine tune for the second round of the proposed concepts.
I personally like to take a look now so we don't veer too far off track from.
Okay.
Me too.
Yeah.
I have to
we
use the
can do that.
restroom. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
2 minutes.
Emily, when is the public input session number 3? When do you think that is going to be scheduled? Date or tentative date?
Should I wait?
Yeah, wait.
We're on a recess.
She can't answer your question, so shut up.
He missed that ruling because he was out last night.
Can I ask you some more questions? You just say I'm not going to answer. Oh, we're losing our city clerk.
I got you covered.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't have that sing-song voice, but I can read.
Is that a compliment or is that a?
That's a compliment to Tammy because I can't do her nice, calm, soothing voice, but I can definitely get, the task accomplished.
Okay, so
Voice comes naturally. Take that.
Washed his hands.
Councilman Moore, what was your question?
Yo, we're back. Question.
Okay. Question was, when is the public input session 3 scheduled? Do you have a date or a tentative time?
It has not been scheduled yet. We wanted to provide a comprehensive update to you all first.
Okay. And then looking at this, the one that we just went through, the Hamby Road,
Yes.
if you got more input that you're going to get, once we get that, how soon do you think you can get this open and move forward on it?
Open the property or adopt the plan?
The property itself, once council has blessed the plan and said, yes, we're going to move forward, do we have kind of a target date or?
So one thing that we haven't broached yet and that will come out in public input session number 3 is timing and specifically budgeting. I think that would
Okay.
speak a lot towards the timing of when. So at number 3, we'll consolidate our available budgeting and then really dive in on prioritization.
Depending on how much we actually want to put in there.
Right,
As far as restrooms, et cetera.
right. I think that would speak to your question a little bit further
Okay.
along the planning effort.
Porta potty.
Thank
So
you.
I'll go to where all of these are.
But before you go too far, Emily, can you go back to your
Yes,
other
yep.
slide? Where we're asking for our input.
Yes.
There you go, that one. Nope. Yeah, that one. So are you going to come back to the question for direction on staff tasks?
We can do that.
Or I can make my comment now?
Yeah, we can review what was presented at that September 25th meeting and come back and close everything up at the end.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is the main landing page for this project. You'll see a lot of the FAQs down here. And this is where we update any upcoming dates. So these are what was presented at the September 25th meeting, noting that we are working now from that meeting on any potential updates. But I think this is a good opportunity for the council to look at it and provide feedback in tandem with what we've received already at the September 25th meeting. So we'll start with Cooper Sandy. So this provides a large swath of that conservation area, more so using it as a buffer for these residents here. This land management up here was my example with the upcoming roundabout.
So when you say conservation area, do you mean like no trails or anything?
Right.
Okay.
And then we're calling out any existing features, like there's a historical milk truck that there's stories about that live on that property. So we wanted to call out anything unique and existing there. This is a large floodplain that exists here with Cooper Sandy Creek coming through the property. This land management here was inspired by just historical conversations about native plantings would go here at a flat part near the Cooper Sandy Dam and Eads Lake. So trail throughout the southern portion of the property, and originally 2 proposed access points on Bethany and Providence, with a proposed amenity and facility like a restroom. And this would lead you to a proposed amenity site that speaks to that interest in fishing and paddle sports from the survey. A little blurry, but this would get you about 60 acres of conservation area, 2 acres of land management, about 2 acres of parking, and about a mile and 1.1 miles of trail.
Emily, is that the lake? Is that what we see by the
Yes.
proposed amenity area? Because I know when we bought this, there was a lake that was supposed to be a beautiful feature of this property.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so this property was acquired in 2 separate acquisitions. That's why there's a property line that splits that lake.
And then are there I have not walked that property.
Yeah.
Are there existing logging trails or trails that go through there that we could actually utilize or maybe improve and utilize?
Yes, there are existing trails. I've walked them myself, and this property was featured in the trail prioritization plan as well. And it was provided by a consultant that proposed its existing trail system in that previous adopted plan too. So to kind of walk you through, this is a good example of to start with. So this is what was presented at September 25th, taking the feedback mostly from this property about access and parking. We're now taking that feedback and working on updates. So from what you saw at September 25th, this is a working draft number 2 for this property. So we've changed where the parking was. Use that conservation area still a little bit to provide the buffer around the houses. But there was interest in some more trails, so we carved out some of that conservation area and added a little bit more trail and tucked the parking a little bit deeper into the property.
I like that parking tucked deeper.
That was one of the main feedback
Yeah.
points.
And I
from-
like I think longer the trail, the better, the more
Yeah.
accessible, the better.
And again, are we looking at, like we talked about with the other, basically having all the area accessible? So if you go in, you want to hike into the wooded area or whatever, that's kind of at your own risk, but it wouldn't
Right.
be off limits, like no trespassing.
Right.
And
So
there's no restroom on this one.
Yeah, so there would be no restroom. We can go back and add.
I don't think in a area this size, you really need that kind of amenity.
I don't think you need to do that kind of cost.
Yeah.
At least not at this stage,
No,
for sure.
maybe in the future, but certainly no time
No,
soon.
I
Like
agree.
Providence Park didn't have a
Right
bathroom
now.
for a long time.
Right.
Right.
You know?
So that's kind of walking you through a property from September 25th, taking what we've heard and altering it to adjust for more tucked away parking, additional trails, keeping some of these proposed amenities and focusing more fine tuning what that could be. Still using some conservation as buffer. This switched from parking to land management because the state mows this dam spillway here. So it wouldn't be fitting to truly call it conservation if the state utilizes it for access. And we've called out to further identify what this land management would be wildlife focused, like those native plantings.
Is that little pink section that goes up against Providence Road, is that where that other gate is? It's kind of past
Yes.
the one farm, but then that actually is where another gate is, access with the road.
Exactly. Yep. So there's a gate here, and that's the one that the state uses to mow this dam spillway.
Okay.
And there's a gate up here near this parking that would be further tucked in. And there's a gate right down here along this property line.
Okay.
So that's kind of the shift that we intend to present moving forward at each property. They're not entirely updated and completed from September 25th. So going back to the other properties, these would be kind of still in the works and not yet edited to what you saw.
Okay.
So this is the pasture property at the intersection of Framinville and Birmingham. We would provide a trail all along the outside of the property. This is existing parking here. There could be a certain amenity right in the middle. And this land management bucket here, we would identify similar to the native plantings at Cooper Sandy, calling it out that it would be wildlife amenity or some kind of landscaping policy from the survey about like a mowing schedule. There's an existing stormwater structure here, so that's what this land management would mean here. You could include another amenity site kind of in the center of this outer trail. And then that last parcel, the city actually owns as well, and it would be a shaded trail. And what we've done here, 2 different color trails, would get you a little over a mile, and you could present and have the conversation about user groups if you wanted to target a certain user group and keep different recreational activities separate if needed.
Emily, is any one of those proposed amenities a water source for horses?
It has not been brought up, no.
Okay, that was a part of the original plan.
Yeah.
There was some discussion about the property next door. I think there was historically when this was privately held, there was some sort of agreement between that and the property owner next door. And the property next door has since changed hands. So I don't know if that discussion just fell by the wayside. I imagine it did, but I would propose that that's one of the amenities that we think about.
Okay.
Is somewhere on the property
Okay.
that we contemplate a water source.
Yeah, and that's exactly the feedback that we're looking for tonight from you all.
It's pasture
Right,
with the intention of being used by horses.
right. So we'll jump to, I'll show Hamby just a little bit bigger. We saw it on the presentation. So this entire area is floodplain. This large swath would more target the land management towards rural viewshed, maintaining that nice drive along Hamby Road. Proposed parking here, that floodplain, a notable existing feature, that bridge, and then still accessible, just smaller trail and an area for a centralized amenity.
I'm not sure there's a need necessarily to put an amenity in every one.
Okay,
I mean, personally, I just leave it natural.
And I think it'll just adopt over time and adapt,
Right.
I guess, because obviously we don't have unlimited funds. So for sure, some of them will just be natural trails.
okay,
Emily, can you hold that for 1 second?
Yeah.
Just for council's sake, this is not to address what our current topic is take a moment and look at the lot coverage that you can see on the top of this page and the bottom of this page. Over the years, we've talked about the importance of taking a look at what kind of coverages we allow. There could not be a more, this is an accommodating picture to make my point, is that the south on a 1 acre property on a little bit less expensive homes has a lot of green that you can see. Go to the north, look at the use of those properties and the coverage. Those are probably not much more, if not 1 acre lots, and the coverage that we allow.
It could be
is-
also the age.
Pardon?
It could be the age. The
Age?
older the lots, the more people have had plants to grow.
Right.
Where could
Well, I think we did at one point revisit what was allowable here in the city for coverage. And I think it's something for future councils to take a look at.
Are you talking about impervious versus pervious and
Yep.
the
I-
percentage?
I don't want to deviate too much from the agenda, so
Yep.
Just food for thought.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
we'll jump to a larger property, Lackey Road. This property
Like a
is partially
pond.
open. So this white trail is the existing trail that is currently open. We've got existing structures here, a barn and the former Wolf residence, and then another water-focused amenity site. This is the existing parking, and if desired, we are also considering some type of small expansion here to meet the needs of this other half of the property if it were to open, as well as a proposed restroom. This one hasn't changed yet since we've gathered initial feedback, but this restroom location would move not directly across from the resident across the street. So we're proposing another trail here, similar to the Freemanville Birmingham. They were two separate colors. So this would provide an opportunity and a discussion for two separate user groups. You've got floodplain here all through the creek that follows and bisects the property. Just carving out this remainder portion of the property to focus on preservation and conservation. And then back up here towards the lake, there's the existing dam and the existing trail that walks through it. So this land management just calls out any future needs for that dam. So now we'll go to the country club. So this is the Southwoods part of the property, and
Okay,
here
there,
is
Bud?
the Kennedy portion. So we'll start with the Kennedy property. These were two separate acquisitions, but they're directly adjacent. The Kennedy property off of Freemanville Road. We've called out that notable red barn that you can see from Freemanville. And there's an existing drive here, and it highlights that tucked away proposed parking. There's existing structures here, so that would speak to any land management needs for structures, as well as a proposed restroom. There's a lot of full sun and large rolling hills here, so you could speak to any wildlife amenity kind of tucked away, like a bee apiary or native plantings. Land management here along Freemanville Road would be similar to what you saw at Hamby, preserving that rural view shed. Some type of proposed amenity here. And then some connector trails to kind of the trailhead. It would take you into the Southwoods of the property, with land management here acting as what we've seen previously, a buffer to some of these residents that back up to the property. And the existing trail that kind of speaks to the trail plan in the Southwoods that Councilwoman Moore alluded to earlier. You could also have another amenity site here. It's a rather large property. And then you'd see another connecting trail that would get you to what exists now, which is overlaid a little transparent here. That would tie you into phase 1 and upcoming phase 2 of MCPP. You're also seeing the
Nice.
stream buffer that follows all down the property, and carving out a large portion of this floodplain for conservation. Any questions here? Okay. And then we'll go to the Web Road green space, our smallest one. So there's existing floodplain and a creek that bisects our two parcels. That's why they're not exactly connected right here. This is a Fulton County utility lot pad right here. And this is a little over 1 acre parcel. And this side here is 3, so it's about 4 acres. So we're proposing this side kind of leave as is, maintain that rural view shed along Webb Road, and that existing and proposed floodplain buffer and stream bank buffer here. So carving out all that, you'd get a small little loop trail. There was interest in Pocket Park historically, so you could have an amenity here, a connector trail here with existing sidewalk, and some sidewalk improvements to fully connect right here to get onto our property. And this land management is specific to this property with concerns that I've heard from residents about kudzu. So that would be the conversation there. And this property also has proposed pedestrian crossing. So that was kind of a rundown of what was presented at September 25th and the science that got us here so far. Everything lives on this website, and we're currently taking everything and kind of what you've seen from then and now to Cooper Sandy, doing that across each property.
Great.
So, yeah. Go ahead.
Go back to the Webb Road one.
Yes.
This goes to the question I asked earlier. So the kind of all that trail or the trees and everything that's not our property, is that the POA?
Right. Yep. And that's what yourself and Sarah had talked about earlier. I think there was historical conversations about acquiring this additional footprint of this Webb Road natural area. And so,
You know where that, does that actually go over and connect to Cogburn at any point? Just is it kind of self-contained behind the
yes,
businesses in the neighborhood?
I believe it's just connected between the communities that surround it.
Okay.
The park at Windward and the preserve at Windward, I believe. So going back to our next steps is to continue to do what we did like at Cooper Sandy, while working in any feedback from the council. And we're curious if we should continue feedback with other organizations and consult with wildlife and conservation organizations to further support some type of environmental measures or conservation measures, as well as what the council would like to see moving forward for continued input from the council.
I think it's important to get their input, but it's important to give them their input based on what we kind of want, so we don't waste a lot of time. But,
Right.
I mean, this is kind of our first rodeo with this large of stuff, so it's good to get some professional input. So,
Okay.
y'all okay with that?
Yeah, my biggest concern is it seems like there's always a lot of building we want to do, whereas I think a lot of this should be kept as natural and just, maybe less is more in this type of thing, and not so necessarily wanting to build stuff and put a lot of things into it. Just keep it as natural as we can.
Completely agree with that. We don't have to have a 50-year-old city's worth of amenities when we're still only 17 years old. There's been a long time coming for some of those things. It's a lot of use over just getting access to the properties. And you hike at your own risk. You have parking area, and the rest is kind of enjoy the nature that's available in Milton. I would offer a couple overriding thoughts to that. I think public-private partnership exploration is maybe an important one to take a look at, not necessarily for amenity construction, but maybe further trails or to get to some of these other access points sooner. And the most important point I would make for you this evening, Emily, is to look at putting all of these and Birmingham Park into a permanent conservation easement where remains untouchable. We bought it with green space money. Our intentions are all the best. Councils change. Let's take the action sooner rather than later. We've been talking about it for as long as we talked about green space. Let's take the action to get this into true conservation easements, and then they're untouchable forever.
Yeah, I think the green space bond parks.
Pretty much.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do with those, right?
No,
Stacy?
well, we
Until-
could buy it back.
Buy it back,
if we wanted to
right.
develop it, but
Why not take the action,
Yeah, no.
minimal
lock-
cost, if
lock it
any,
in.
That's the
and
whole-
lock it in? And then add Birmingham Park to that. We know we've been trying to preserve that just like this all along. Let's take those final steps and get those things done, please.
At least my input would be, I think the sooner we can get these parks open, or the green spaces open where we could start using them, that's what I'm hearing from people is we've been paying taxes on it.
Yep.
Why are they still locked up and fenced and no trespassing? Can we do something simple like we did with Lakapani or on Lackey Road, where we don't put a lot of infrastructure in, but put enough so that you can have parking and then access to kind of where the trails start today. And then the only thing we might want to do is you might want to do some type of markers, simple markers, so people, if they do go on the trail, they can make their way back safely instead of having to put breadcrumbs down.
None of these parks are so big that if you kept walking in one direction,
You would run
your way out.
Yep.
Get them open, open, open.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
So we'll take that. We'll explore possible partnerships, update these maps from that September 25th meeting and your feedback tonight. They'll live on that website updated. We'll announce that, consolidate everything into an additional updated community survey, and take those concepts updated round two to an additional input session, and come back to you for continued guidance.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on this, Tammy?
Miss Julie Zonner Bailey, do you want to comment on this?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
And motion for the,
Make a motion to extend
it's
public comments. 10 minutes.
the ordinance says 10
Yeah,
minutes
10
per
minutes.
item or 2 minutes per person, but it's only one commenter.
Okay. Have a motion.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good evening again. My name remains Julie Zonner Bailey, and I still live at 255 Hickory Flat Road, Milton, Georgia, 3004. Tonight has been filled with lots of really important items and issues. I really appreciate the opportunity to address each of these as they have come up. I certainly care deeply about protecting and preserving green space throughout Milton and have for the 35 years that I've lived here. I've been a longtime proponent of protecting green space forever, including placing all green space into conservation easements for perpetuity. So I applaud the fact that it came up this evening and would like to certainly see each of you embrace conservation easements for perpetuity. We've talked about it for a long time. This is more true today than ever. The time is now to proceed with this long promised protection of various green spaces in Milton. Placing precious green space into a conservation easement should begin with the Birmingham Parkland and Preserve. It is the largest contiguous green space owned by the city of Milton and its citizens, and it includes environmentally sensitive lands. This is low-hanging fruit, and the opportunity to protect this green space should be seized by all of you, those here tonight as well as those not sitting in their chairs. It's something that we've certainly heard many people support, and the time is now. Please proceed with the legal documentation necessary to place this 205 plus acres of precious green space into a conservation easement. Many, if not all of you, have said that you support this initiative. If so, then why wait? If so, why not tonight to give direction to staff? This should take place, and it should take place soon, not later. Furthermore, green space, including that most recently purchased with funds from the Green Space Bond, can be placed in conservation easements for perpetuity and still be accessible to all citizens. And citizens do want access to the green space now owned by Milton. Citizens view these purchased green spaces as their green space, as they should. I attended the most recent Green Link meeting and listened to many citizens with interest as they repeatedly asked and commented on the desire to have access to the green space purchased by the city of Milton on their behalf. All of our green space properties generally should be made available, and soon. There should not have to be extensive costs to allow all these properties to be accessible. I've certainly heard many of you this evening mention your support of getting those open and accessible sooner rather than later. Existing natural trails can be enhanced with low-cost, low-impact approaches, such as the use of a simple forestry mower. I believe this is what was used at the Birmingham Park. Similar efforts could and should be made at the other properties that we now own. The majority of lands owned by Milton and its citizenry should be made available rather than to be restricted. I think I heard this evening that only 3 of 6 of our properties are available. Access should be immediate. I feel certain citizens would also volunteer to help clear trails and enhance these green spaces, just as they've done at the Birmingham Parkland and Preserve. Folks want to be involved. They want to have access to green space. Boy Scouts want to help. There's lots of Eagle projects that could be put into place to help support the opening of these particular green space parcels. Worth noting is that green space can be accessible and protected for perpetuity simultaneously. These are not mutually exclusive. Efforts to make all green space accessible and protected with conservation easements for perpetuity should be pursued as a priority with intention and time sensitivity. These are citizen lands. I also believe that our green spaces should not be cleared of trees or rural view sheds removed to make room for parking or access. I did hear some mention this evening that at least some of those parking areas proposed initially have perhaps been shifted. Instead, careful consideration should be given to keeping the rural view sheds, protecting trees along roadways and on these green space lands, and making any parking hidden with a gravel base. Rural by design should be a theme intentionally considered and incorporated in all that the city does, whether it's dealing with our green spaces, our roadways, our bridges, lighting, or signage. I'd also like to make mention, after hearing some of the commentary from Emily this evening, with regard to the community input, it seems that we certainly need more community input. I would suggest that the city send out the survey again and again if necessary. I would suggest that participants sign in at these meetings. I know that when I came, I was not asked to sign in. That seems like a missed opportunity to capture which citizens are present, because then we can follow up with citizens to ensure that we captured all of their input. I'd like to know how many folks were at that meeting. I think that we need more folks at more meetings. I would encourage that our community input, that just like we heard with transportation, that we go and seek citizen input at football games. We should have had citizen input captured at the Crabapple Fest. I didn't hear that we did that. I think it's a missed opportunity, and I think our parklands are just as important, if not more important, than our transportation methodologies. So let's make sure that we're actually capturing community input in ways that will allow us to get more citizen input before a deadline is reached. I heard mention of a third meeting, yet we don't have a date. Citizens, including myself, deserve ample notification so we can actually get to a meeting. We do have other meetings, we do have other obligations, and when we find out about meetings at the last minute, it makes it super difficult to be there without changing other plans. And it's important, and folks want to provide input. We need to make that accessible for them. I also heard some questions, and Councilman Jacobus, you asked a great question, and it started with Hamby. What actual amount of land and percentage of land is actually being proposed for accessibility? I heard some different numbers. I know that I was confused by the numbers. Maybe I just didn't hear them correctly. Initially, it sounded like more than 16 acres would not be available. And then the numbers were changed, and I heard 18 would be available. So maybe before tonight closes, we could get a better assessment on each parcel of how much of that land would actually be available for accessibility, because I didn't hear that. I'd also like to understand how we're capturing the citizen input at meetings. I know there were lots of sticky notes. I didn't see any pictures taken, and so I hope that the sticky notes didn't fall off the maps when they left this room to go elsewhere. I know some of the input was captured. I'm not clear that all of the input was captured. I certainly have heard from lots and lots of citizens who still contact me regularly that they feel a higher percentage of the land needs to be accessible. I don't know that when we only have a 1 acre loop on a 100 acre parcel or a 1 acre loop on a bigger parcel is truly providing the accessibility that citizens expect. So perhaps before the close of this work session, we could maybe better understand those numbers. It was not clear to me. At the end of the day, we need green space protected for perpetuity. We need green space accessible. We need green space to remain natural. I appreciate all of your efforts. It's really important, and we need to get this one right, and we need to do it sooner rather than later. I really appreciate the opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Will you please call any other speakers? Is that it?
That's
Okay.
it.
We'll call the last item.
Actually,
Last-
before we do that, just
Sure.
make a closing comment. I think Julie made a good point. And Emily, I just maybe share my answer to one of Julie's questions that she posed. My position tonight on the green space is 100% of it should all be open. It's just only some parts will be more treated to be accommodating in terms of available trails, but literally, except for a danger zone, 100% of the parks should be available.
Yeah, I think, I agree with that 100% should be open, but I don't think that we need to have this drive to put a trail everywhere.
I completely agree.
You
We
know,
could have
let's
a park.
open it up, and if somebody wants to walk through the woods, let them walk through the woods.
Exactly.
We're all on the same page. We're good.
Right.
Yep.
Thank
Better.
Hey, quick.
you.
My turn.
1 minute break. 2 minute break.
I'm going to the other one, just so we don't take a third.
I'm just gonna wait.
I really thought we'd be home by now. Glad I walked.
Where my car alarm was going on. Don't go out there.
I know, I'm not going to.
Oh, you go down. Amy, please call the next item.
Mayor, the next item is the Public Works Strategic Plan Progress Report. Our Public Works Director, Ms. Sarah Leaders.
Sarah, before you start, I just want to add one other comment about when we were talking about just a minute ago. We mentioned that we were going to move the parking in one of the places. I would think that on all of these properties, we want to make sure that the parking is away from the road, that you're not driving down the street and there's a parking lot with 20 cars, even if it's a gravel parking lot. If we can hide it, let's hide it.
Definitely makes sense. Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
You're good.
It's good.
Okay, so this is the report. Guess it's switching to about once a year. We'll give an update on our strategic priorities and goals. So this is a list of the ones associated for Public Works to ensure sustainability and resiliency, acquire, manage, and develop public land and resources to support Milton's high quality of life, and then the each of those items. So I'll first provide some updates on some completed items, accomplishments since the last time I provided an update on this. Then I'll address any items that are delayed and how we're working to overcome these. And last, hit on the focus items, which are typically the time-sensitive items. There's going to be some that are time-sensitive, but they're low-hanging fruit, and some that require a high amount of labor. So overall, for Public Works, we've got 60+ projects in this combination of strategic plan and comp plan. And the focus area for, again, those time-sensitive projects is about 16. These are the 6 that have been completed in 2023, and I'm really just going to highlight the last 3 tonight. Starting with local road safety plan implementation. So plan was adopted in August of 2022. And since then, we've started undertaking measures that really work towards implementing that plan. So we moved from adopting the plan into the operational stage of it and with implementation. And we've done a variety of things so far that have really moved us into this implementation bucket. The first was some bicycle signage. We coordinated with the Trails Committee, their bicycle focus group, on where to place those, just as a pilot project with that. Approaching some curves or roundabouts or intersections, we've looked at some of the dynamic signage that flashes and really targeted that towards the areas where we were having concerns with getting driver attention. And lastly, we tried a pilot project at the Hopewell Bethany roundabout to slow vehicles on the exiting. The other thing to mention is the speed limit reduction. The first round of that is nearly completed. We're in the last stage with the state to get that formalized and approved. We've received the preliminary approval. We updated our ordinance, and the last step is just to get our radar permit updated. So we expect that in the very near future. And at the next meeting, there will be an agenda item to consider for some additional speed studies. We didn't identify exact locations, but we just set a bucket for being able for the city to do counts and then select locations that met the criteria of either adjoining lower speeds and other jurisdictions. So that's all in the works to continue that next round of speed limit reviews. For the walkability item, there were two that talked about a baseline for households connected to activity areas, as well as a walkability study. We used the Walk Score website, which produced a score for the entire city with really the focus, high walkable areas being the Deerfield Highway 9 area, as well as the Crabapple area. And Milton score is a 12, which is most errands do still require a car. We felt while we have that data and we hope to improve on that, the better measure for the city is the number of households connected to activity areas. So the map shows those areas of commercial, active parks, schools, form-based code, other businesses, just areas where there are activities and there's a desire to walk. So we created a baseline of how many households are currently connected, and we're at 3,150. And the other component of that item was a target, and we're looking to increase that by 10% by the end of this plan. Now, the two delayed items that aren't time sensitive, there were 4 delayed items. These are the two that are not time sensitive. First one's to collaborate with the bicycling community. And as you heard in the CTP, we have those initial routes, and this will really be the next step once we've had that initial communication with the focus group, and now we're going to move into really creating that bike safety initiative through these items. So we hope to, once the CTP is finalized, to re-engage that group and really get this initiative underway in the next year. Increase recycling alternatives in terms of ease of recycling, types that can be readily recycled for Milton residents. So on this item, we are making some good strides. Earlier this year, we received an EPD recycling grant. In the next couple months, we hope to have that equipment arrive, deployed, and a plan for some various items to be recycled. Additionally, the recycling and solid waste management plan is funded in this year's budget. So we are beginning consultant selection to get that plan going. That will also look at other recyclables and ways to increase those alternatives.
Sarah?
Yep.
You don't know anyone who doesn't know. What is YOY?
Year over year.
God, Rick.
And then these are the time sensitive items, the 4 that are, or the ones that are on track, as well as the couple that we have marked as delayed. So updates to stormwater and land protection, we're going to be bringing that before you in upcoming fiscal 24. The prioritized Bethany character area sidewalk connections, we talked about that earlier through a combination of 4 different projects. We have either currently going with T-SPLOS-2 or planned on the T-SPLOS-2 list to really identify some quick wins for pedestrians around that area of the city. And lastly, encourage all roadways to incorporate design elements to reflect specific character area and implement associated branding through the branding study. And we are participating in that study as a contributor and to get information. We envision this being, any updates to our city limit sign, our roadway signage, any other aesthetics that we can carry forward into projects we do along our roadways. So that one is underway in coordination with that branding study. The 2 that we have marked on delayed are based on the dates that were in our plan. We had some dates associated with these 2 items, but as you've heard tonight, they're both well underway, and feel like we are making some good progress on bicycle safety as well as the green space strategy. And that's it.
Do we have any public comment?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Any questions for Sarah?
Yes, Sarah, Earlier it was talked about how many signs we have up when you couldn't, I mean, there is a lot of signs we've been putting up. Are there ways to camouflage the poles that are holding the signs? I mean, if you look at the roundabouts, you see the triangle that has it, and that's fine. But also what jumps out is all the steel holding it. There used to be like a rust type or something that, kind of blends in with the surroundings. Do we do any of that or no, or?
We don't yet. One thing that I've noticed a neighboring jurisdiction does is they put the reflective sheeting on the front of the post. So if it's a white sign, there's a white reflective sheeting that kind of blends it a little more, but it also makes the sign stand out a little more. It gives that metal post, I guess, a little more of a polished look. There's also different types of post. If we focus on certain character areas initially and we do a different type of signpost, either it's currently like a U channel that has holes in it so you can adjust the sign height, but there are some more decorative options if that's something that we could look at through that branding. If
That
maybe
comes
we
through that.
focus on certain areas first and try it out and see the feel for it. But yeah, that would definitely fit under that
Okay.
roadway features and how it interacts with our branding and wayfinding.
Okay.
Anything else for Sarah? Okay, with that, I have a motion to adjourn.
Sarah,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.